Phoenix Rising by Michael Anastas. Ash hesitated. I guess you're right. He rubbed his forehead. Do you think I could have some time to think? Time is of the essence. Brock stepped forward. Merlin, Ash just rose from the dead. Don't you think you should give him some time to think about everything? Merlin nodded. I guess you're right. He turned back to his arcanine and looked over his shoulder. I could probably wait as long as you need it, but Team Rocket isn't as patient. They'll probably tell you anyway, but they're temporarily on our side and about to leave for the coast in a week. That's how much time you have. Otherwise, we're on our own. Misty stepped forward. Do we really need Team Rocket? Well, it is their property. They'll know the area. Plus, they have access to a large amount of firearms. So does Lieutenant Surge, said Brock. He's in the military. Why not ask him? Merlin put his hand up to his chin. Surge and I don't exactly see eye to eye on anything, but I guess he'll understand our situation. All right, Ash, while I'm talking things over with Surge, I want you to think about this. I know you just rose from the dead, so you're probably not ready to face death again. But remember, 50 million lives are at threat right now. Just something to think about while you're deciding. He turned around and walked away, with Arcanine walking proudly behind him. Misty walked up and placed her hand on Ash's shoulder, fighting back the urge to hug him. Ash, I think there's something you should do right away. Huh? The world has gone to pot since you died, Ash, said Brock. Your Pokemon have gone insane. Professor Oak is going through a state of depression, getting plastered every night in the basement. Your mother... He stopped. My mother? What about my mother? Misty sighed. We don't know. Ash went frantic. Oh my god! Professor! Mother! My Pokemon! We should probably get your Pokemon first, said Misty. Trust me, they really do have it the worst. Misty and Ash walked out of the cemetery and away from what many believed to be Ash's final resting grounds. Brock followed idly behind them. Gary stayed behind. His fists were clenched down by his sides and his teeth ground together. In his rage, Gary went back and brought the bottle of wine from his car and prepared to smash it against the tombstone. Cheater! He yelled as he kicked the lid shut. You were supposed to be dead! I swear I'll... He raised the bottle of wine over the tombstone, but before he brought it down, he gently lowered it down into his hands and popped the cork. You'll return to the dead, Ash Ketchum. I'll drink to that. He raised the bottle to his lips and drank. Misty was right about Ash's Pokemon having it the worst. Had Merlin been there, he probably would have broken down and cried. Venusaur had sunk as low as pretending Blastoise was Ash Ketchum, and vice versa. Charizard stood in the corner, wrapped up in his wings, possibly waiting for a safe to drop onto his head. Pidgeot strutted around in a circle, occasionally stopping to mimic one of Ash's poses. Pikachu, until he had ran to the funeral, had given a thunder shock to anyone or anything that came near him, minus Ash's Pokemon. Meowth was there as well, watching over the insane Pokemon and shuddering at the thought of it. How could they care for him so much? The knob turned suddenly, and Meowth jumped from the window, fearing that it would probably be the nurse. Merlin Durai was his only ally, so there was no reason to be there. Hey guys, did you miss me? All eyes turned towards the door, and for a moment, the gears could be heard turning in their heads. Ash walked calmly and closed the door, keeping his eyes on his friends. Don't you recognize me? It's me, Ash, in the flesh! Then, the room exploded with life. Blastoise was first to react, tackling Ash in a hug. Ash laughed and fought free, only to end up between Charizard's wings. Pidgeot flew over and did his best to get his wings around him once he was free of Charizard. Yeah, I missed you guys, Ash said with a smile. No sooner than that did Venusaur tackle him to the ground. Looks like you guys missed me a little more than I missed you, Venusaur cried out and licked Ash's face. Very heartwarming. Ash looked up and saw Meowth sitting on the windowsill. Very heartwarming indeed. However, one question remains unanswered. How? Ash stood up. Meowth. In the flesh. He jumped down from the sill and onto the floor. Don't worry, I'm not here for your Pikachu. Pika! Merlin already told me what you want, said Ash. The oil refinery. Merlin? Meowth rubbed his chin with one of his paws. That explains everything. Boy, when is that kid gonna find something he can't do? Don't hold your breath. Huh? Meowth turned around and looked up at the windowsill. Yeah! A Ninetales climbed in through the window. I said, don't hold your breath, she said in an almost elegant human voice. Huh? Meowth pointed at her. Oh, you must be one of Merlin's. That explains it, I suppose. And you would be Team Rocket's Meowth, she shot back, who learned to speak English for the sole purpose of impressing a rich girl. Furthermore, I'm not one of Merlin's. My master is a phoenix trainer who passed the tests required. She looked up at Ash. Just like you. That's besides the point. What do you think you're doing spying on us? Ninetales bowed her head and looked eye to eye with Meowth. What were you doing here, spying on Ash and his Pokemon? No reason. Ninetales stood up on her hind legs and shrugged her shoulders. Right, and I'm sure that little camera on your head is just there because it looks cool. Huh? Before Meowth could react, Ninetales pounced on top of him and bit down on the tiara-like part of Meowth's head. Ow! Ow! That hurts, you stupid fox! Suddenly, there was a snapping sound, and a piece of Meowth came off in Ninetales' mouth. Ash cringed at the sight of it, but then he noticed the little wires poking out of what should have been Meowth's forehead. Meowth sat on the floor, perfectly intact, holding the other half of the camera which fit nicely over his head. Ninetales carried her half over to Ash and dropped it into his lap. It's mostly rubber, but if you look closely at the lines, you'll notice that they're actually crystalline. The camera is small enough to see through a keyhole, so the majority of the weight and mass is actually the battery, being that Meowth could have been here for a long time. Because of its size, it can fit almost anywhere. She stood up on her hind legs and looked down at Meowth. Of course, the plastic glare gave it away. Ash's gaze was focused the whole time on Ninetales. How do you know all this? I'm surprised you could even say that. Ninetales smiled and placed one of her paws on Ash's shoulder. We've had a lot of practice. Don't feel bad. Meowth stood up. I'll bet you're a spy too. Who were you spying on? Me or Ash? Ninetales looked down at Meowth, not taking a step away from Ash. If you must know, Merlin was worried about Ash and how he would face the consequences of his death. So I volunteered to keep an eye on him. Of course, there are 3 other Pokemon in the room watching you right now. Meowth spun around endlessly trying to find them, while Ninetales put her arm around Ash's shoulders and whispered to him, doing her best to point them out without Meowth knowing. The leader is Gengar. He's actually standing right next to Meowth right now. Then there's Rattata in the vents, and Vaporeon, who's currently in the clogged sink. Meowth stared around the room, but then gave up when he noticed Ash's Pokemon closing in on him. You're watching Jessie too, aren't you? Of course, and Giovanni, and the troops he sent to ambush Merlin on his way out. What? The boss didn't send any troops! Do you know that? There are no troops. Are there? No, but you get my point, do you not? Meowth sighed. Of course. He jumped up to the windowsill. Well, now that you've destroyed the camera, Jessie's probably going ape about it. She's probably on her way right now, so best I leave and head her off. Ash, we've been enemies and all, but you need my help. I know. Just checking. Meowth jumped out the window, and Ash made note of how the water in the sink in the corner went down the drain. Ninetails turned towards Ash. I guess I might as well tell you why I'm here. Merlin already called up Lieutenant Surge. Merlin didn't even get the message out, and Surge has already promised that he can use anything he has to offer. Now, I know it's still early, but time is of the essence. Have you made up your mind? Ash looked over Ninetails' shoulder at his Pokemon, who stood in a line behind her. From Venusaur to Blastoise, they all nodded. Alright, when do we leave? Ninetails threw her arms around Ash's neck and hugged him. Thank God! For a minute, I thought you wouldn't do it! She pushed herself away, but kept her paws on his shoulders. I'll come back as soon as I'm able. Just so we know in advance, is there anywhere else you'll be going? Ash rubbed the back of his neck, pretty embarrassed that a beautiful, talking female Pokemon had just shown affection towards him. Professor Oak's lab, I suppose. All right, I'll meet you when you get there. Ninetails fell back down on all fours and climbed out the window, but before she disappeared, she looked over her shoulder. You've made the right choice, Ash. That I am sure of. She leapt out the window and disappeared from sight. Ash took his Pokeballs off the shelf in the corner. What do you say, guys? Ready to go back to the big leagues? The response was thunderous.